talking about fats tonight. So, as I said, I don't care about weight. I don't focus on weight. I think can be quite disempowering. However, we want to look at the midsection fat or weight because that can actually be a direct link to a risk of cardiovascular disease, so heart diseases. So I think it's at 1.2 million Australians have heart disease. Now, you might have heard about this. You might have, you might hear people talk about saturated fats and unsaturated fats and all of these lifestyle risk factors and things like that. And it might have been going over your head, or it might not be on your radar because you aren't experienced it, or you don't know of someone who's experienced, or you may actually know someone. So if there is anyone that you know of who is experiencing anything like this, then please share this video with them. So I want to share a bit of a story to start with. I was actually 22 years old when I was hooked up to a heart monitor to test my heart. I was having heart palpitations. I was also consuming a diet full of saturated fats. So from junk foods, from animal fats, just an overconsumption of that. I was eating a lot of refined carbohydrates and sugars. I was drinking a lot of binge drinking, no exercise, didn't even know what exercise was. Well, I did, but I just didn't do it. And my waist circumference was actually well over 100 centimeters. For women to decrease your risk significantly of heart disease, we need it to be under 80 centimeters. And for men, under 94 centimeters. So if you measure around your waist and you notice those numbers are a little bit higher, this isn't because of what the physical attributes. This is about what is happening internally. This is about the health of your cardiovascular system. This is about the health of your heart. That is our lifeblood. So due to all this saturated fat, I ended up having my gallbladder removed by emergency surgery one Saturday night. Now, I'd gotten to a stage where I was sitting on the fence with my health. And if I sat on the fence any longer, it was going to make me chronically ill or worse. I was going down a really dangerous path. And this is a path that I see so many people going down. And yeah, it may not impact on us for like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but it does catch up with us over time. So this is another topic that is very close to my heart, mind the pun. And this is because it's our top cause of death and it is preventable. And genetics aside, like a lot of people come to me and say, oh, my grandpa had heart disease, like it's in my genetics. We can determine if we turn our genes on or not. There are lifestyle factors that are going to impact significantly, and heart disease is one of those. So I want to talk today to some really simple lifestyle tricks that you can do to make sure you're being proactive about your health, about your heart health, about your cardiovascular health. So if you want to follow along in the hub, there is the handout that you can follow along. But I want to talk about the two different types of fat. Now, there is a giveaway. I'm going to talk about that more at the end for tagging a friend, sharing this post with people. However, I do want to say that if you want more information on this, if you are someone who's feeling like that your food plan is a bit unbalanced in regards to not only fats, but whether it's carbohydrates, proteins is sometimes not an issue unless we are having too much animal protein. With that then comes the saturated fat. So if you're finding like we want to eat everything in moderation, right? And there's often times where we can get really caught up in this diet and that diet, and that's not anything that I focus on. What we need to do is go back to eating real food and also looking at, are we over consuming refined carbohydrates, saturated fats, things like that, junk food. So this is where the issues come in when we're having too much of that. So for those of you who know about your fats, this is going to be validation. For those of you who are kind of like, I don't even know where to start with fats, this is actually going to give you a really great basic understanding of what's happening with fats that we consume and what happens in our body. So we've got two main forms, unsaturated fats and saturated fat. So we want to have more of those unsaturated fats. So they come mainly from plants, things like olives, extra virgin olive oil, things like peanuts, nuts, and seeds. So linseeds, really good with omega-3s in them as well, things like avocado. So think about those. And if you're wanting more support with knowing what, don't want to use diet, but food plan to follow, look up the Mediterranean diet. It's high in vegetables, in unsaturated fats like olive oil, and it also really focuses around not having too much meat and having more fish. So that's where that comes in if you want more information on that. Saturated fats, however, these are really abundant in our animal products. So milk, cream, cheese, butter, meat, eggs. And for all my coconut junkies out there, like I was, coconut oil has some of the highest levels of saturated fat, unfortunately. Sorry. Now, if you're someone that's on a whole, fully plant-based diet and you don't have any other real forms of fat and you're having a bit of coconut oil here and there, wonderful. However, if you're someone who's experiencing issues with blood pressure or heart stuff, or you're having a lot of animal products, then adding coconut oil on there isn't actually going to be heart healthy. So neither is adding a whole heap of extra virgin olive oil. We'll talk more about what's required each day, how much you should be having, and things like that in a second. So what happens with the saturated fat is it actually impacts on our type of cholesterol. There's two main types of cholesterol in our body, and we need cholesterol in our body. It's actually important for synthesis of hormones, of cell membranes. It does so many different things. But there's two forms that run around in our blood, LDL and HDL. So low density, high density. Now with the low density, we don't want high levels of that. We want low levels of low density, and we want to be able to bring them down. And the way that we can do that is by reducing our intake of saturated fats from dairy products, animal products, but also saturated fats come in the form of trans fats or hydrogenated oils from junk food. So I've got to, if you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll actually see my blog post on oils. If not, Green Tara Wellness oil, friend or foe, type that in on Google, you'll find it. And it talks more about what happens to the oil in junk food. And it actually turns liquid oil into saturated fats, which raise our cholesterol. So things like, there's pictures on there of what have them, like wraps, like, you know, you have your wraps have got that in it. You can have muesli bars that have these fats in them. You can have chocolates, lollies, biscuits, savory biscuits, like so many things can contain these. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, like what am I going to eat? And that's exactly what I help support people with. But I say start simple, start small, start with something like one meal and look at how can I bring in more avocado or nuts and seeds or extra virgin olive oil. Like this is such a big topic, but I want you to know that there's some small little steps that you can start with. All righty. So the other thing too, this was what I found was really important, is that with our LDL cholesterol, so that cholesterol we want to keep down, and that can often spike when we have more saturated fats, is what we want to do is also look at lifestyle. So let's say we've got this LDL. Imagine like there's little people in your bloodstream. Imagine there's like little people in your veins and your arteries and everything, and they've got these wheelbarrows. And they've got these wheelbarrows of the LDL cholesterol. We don't use bad and good because, yeah, anyway, we've just got these, we want to reduce our LDL cholesterol. So we've got these little wheelbarrows of LDL cholesterol going around in our bloodstream, and they're floating around and they're fairly happy. However, what can happen is that these LDL cholesterol in little wheelbarrows, they're quite fragile. And then we're exposed to free radicals in our body. And what they come from is things like stress, things like toxins, things like smoking, things like alcohol. And what it does is they're quite fragile. So the free radicals actually cause the wheelbarrow to tip over, cause the LDL to spill out and spill into our bloodstream. And that's when it can actually create that plaque in our blood vessels. And then what happens is that our plaque builds up, our blood vessels get smaller, so our blood pressure increases. We've got more of a demand on our heart and our cardiovascular system. Is this making sense, guys? I hope it is. It's making sense in my head. So they spill out and they flow all into our blood vessels. And this is where we can create issues with heart disease and things like that. So you've got, so diet and lifestyle impacts. So we've got this LDL cholesterol, the cholesterol we want to reduce, but it's often high because of processed foods and animal fats, saturated fats. So we're getting too much of it in our bloodstream, and there's lots of it in there. And then these free radicals that release because of stress, because of toxins, pollution, alcohol, cigarettes. What happens is that it causes it, they're fragile, and it causes them to pop or leak out of the wheelbarrow and go through our blood vessels. So that's where it's a two-pronged approach. We need to decrease our saturated fats, and we also need to decrease our exposure to those things: alcohol, cigarettes, pollutants. So look at what you're cleaning your house with, what you're putting on your skin. Stress, yeah, may not be able to change it, but we can definitely change our outcome to it, our outlook on it. That's a story for another day. I've got plenty of blogs on stress management and reframing your stress. So it's a lifestyle and a diet thing. Now, let's get down to the nuts and bolts. Now we've gone through all the sciencey, technical stuff. We want to look at having between 30 to 65 grams of fat per day, which is only around 3 tablespoons. So if you have 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil in your day, then there's your quota. That's not to mention all the other fat that we have from nuts and seeds and animal fats and dairy. So it builds up over time. Now, what it works out to be is we want to make sure that we're having about 20 to 35% of our daily intake of food from fat. So if you think about 20 to 35%, so you've got a plate of food, got all this beautiful food on it, 20 to 35% of that comes from our fats. So it's kind of like an eighth of a pie. If you imagine a pie, it's about an eighth of a pie. And so say, for instance, a person is having like 800 kilojoules, 8,000 kilojoules a day. That's the average, 8,000 kilojoules a day. It's about 1,600 to just over 2,000 kilojoules from your fat. So if you track kilojoules, then that's something you can look at. Personally, I don't, but a great way, a really great way to look at managing your fat intake and supporting your health. Some simple tips that I'm going to give you guys that you can do. So start with a meat-free meal a week. I've got heaps of recipes on my website that you can follow with that. Number 2 is to cook in small amounts of extra virgin olive oil. No butters, no margarine, no coconut oil, no vegetable oils, none of that. And then also avoid your trans and your saturated fats and your processed foods. And again, I've got that oils post. So if you want that, comment oils in the comments and I can send it to you. If you're on my mailing list, you're going to get it anyway. So I know that was a lot of information for you guys, but to recap, number 1 leading cause of death in Australia is heart disease. 27% of Australians dealing with this, dying from this. So what we want to do is reduce our saturated fat intake that comes from animals, dairy, and a lot of processed foods. So have a look out for them. You will see on labels now, they'll say saturated and trans fats. And there's more information on what to look for. If you want to make a time to chat and you want more information on this, please let me know. That's the number 1 thing. We're eating too many saturated fats, and then our stress, pollution, alcohol, and cigarettes are causing that to leach out into our bloodstream and cause that plaque buildup, which causes that disease. So 3 things we can start to do: have a meat-free meal or day a week, cooking extra virgin olive oil, follow the Mediterranean diet, and then also avoid those trans fats, saturated fats in your foods. And it may mean that it's like making your own things, making your own cakes, because at least you know that you can choose to put extra virgin olive oil in it rather than those trans fats that also impact on our heart health. Whew, we got there. So there you have it. That is our Wellness Wednesday for this week on fats. The giveaway is for sharing this, for tagging someone who needs to hear this. You're going to go into the draw to get a complimentary 30-minute heart health consult with me to talk more about this in depth. So if it's you or someone you know who needs more support with this, please reach out. Let's make a time and let's work towards healthier hearts, happier hearts. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for joining me.